25-year-old Chance disappeared during Independence weekend following an argument with his wife. He was last seen on surveillance footage walking through the nearest town. Despite extensive searches and multiple leads, his whereabouts remains unknown. With a final strange text and in-laws acting shifty, what happened to this Wyoming cowboy? And will his family get the answers they deserve? This is the disappearance of Chance Englebert. I'm Ori Cat and welcome to my channel. I deliver cases to you in the dramatisation format, so if that's something you enjoy, you'll be happy to know we upload once a week. As always, my aim is to give a voice to the victims and remember them as they were. So with that, let us begin. Chance Leslie Englebert was born on the 2nd of December 1993. He grew up on his family farm in Edgemont, Dakota, with his two brothers and his parents Edward and Dawn Englebert. He stood at 5'9" with light brown shaggy hair and blue eyes. Edgemont is a small town in Fall River County. It consists of a tight-knit community situated in the Black Hills region of South Dakota. It was definitely a place that encouraged the love of the outdoors, and Chance's family was no exception. As he grew up, Chance was known to be a very fearless and kind boy, perhaps on the quieter side. He'd always been hard-working, incredibly active, and just overwhelmingly positive. Some way between 2009 and 2010, at the age of 17, Chance got his first car. And in an action that showed just how much Chance cared about other people, he painted the car light blue in dedication to colon cancer, which was something one of his relatives was suffering from at the time. He also had the name Cody written on the front. Cody was one of Chance's friends all the way back from preschool. Cody was also a pit crew member. Chance went on to study at Laramie Community College. There, he studied diesel and welding mechanics so that he could follow in his father's footsteps. Whilst he was at Laramie, Chance was a big fan of bareback riding, and as well as doing rodeo, he also rode bulls. In 2016, Chance won the bareback riding competition at Gillette College's Spring Rodeo.
Okay. Well, did you like that bareback ride?
Good horse. And finally coming back together, so it's a good rodeo. Some kind of low spot right now, but I'm climbing up out of there and just gonna get better from here on out.
And by this point, at 23 years old, Chance was known to be a very generous man. He would certainly help other people out without a second thought. He was highly religious and he wasn't a complainer. He always kept his head down and just always put in a good work shift. At some point, another passion took over for Chance, pushing aside his love of rodeo, and this was to work on demolition derby cars. This was a hobby he'd practically been brought up on and was super interested in it since childhood. Alongside this, Chance worked at Bel Air Mine, and this mine was a particularly notable one in the Powder River Basin, because Wyoming is one of the largest coal-producing regions in the United States. Whilst he was working in the mines, Chance went on to meet his best friend Matt Miller, and these two had so many common interests and they got on like a house on fire. And when they weren't working, they would spend their time hunting and fishing. On the whole, Chance loved spending time with his friends and family. In fact, his favourite season was fall. This was because it was football season, a time where he and his family could sell their cattle, and it was a great hunting season. The following year, in October 2017, Chance and Matt decided that they wanted to go up to Scottsbluff, Nebraska to pick up 2 derby cars. Chance was particularly on board for this because he'd been dying to meet up with this girl he'd been talking to online. She was called Bailey. So this first meeting with Bailey went really well, and soon Chance found himself in a relationship with her. And by mid-November, he had even introduced her to his entire family. Though I think at first, Chance's family were quite taken aback at the fact that he'd met someone through online dating. That was just something that made them kind of sceptical. Regardless, Chance and Bailey were as happy as could be and were greatly enjoying each other's company. A year after, in October 2018, Chance and Bailey got married. And it was a small ceremony, it only really included close friends and family. And the significance of the wedding date was that it actually fell on the anniversary of when the two of them started dating. Chance and Bailey eventually went on to have a son, but like all relationships, there were certainly some rocky parts. Sometimes there were tensions between the two families because on special occasions, Chance and Bailey would often go see her family more than his. And so at some point, this kind of gave Chance's family the impression that Bailey may not like them very much. Not to mention, allegedly coming up to July, the month of independence, Bailey started becoming very interested in what Chance was doing when he left the house. During this time, she wrongly suspected that there might have been an affair going on. Regardless, the 4th of July came around in 2019 and Bailey wanted to spend that weekend with her family. So together with their infant son, they drove from Moorcroft, Wyoming to Gering, Nebraska. It was around a 3.5-hour drive. Now 25 years old, it wasn't that Chance was particularly feeling unhappy about going up to Gering. It was just currently at the time, he was really under a lot of stress and pressure. He had just been laid off from his mining company with 600 others, and so in a scramble to find a job that would basically be able to sustain himself, Bailey and his son, he was planning to take up a job with a propane company. He would be starting on the following Monday when they got back from seeing Bailey's parents. Now this propane job was essentially just something that could keep them afloat whilst Bailey was working through nursing school. Because you have to remember, Bailey was also a young mother, as well as partaking in studying. So Chance was likely feeling a bit out of sorts this weekend, and considering all of that was going on, it was probably a time where he would rather be spending the Independence weekend with his own family rather than Bailey's. On Saturday, the 6th of July 2019, Chance spent the day playing golf with Bailey's father and her sister's boyfriend. And it was a warm day meant for relaxing. They had some drinks, shot some rounds, and they just basically stayed on conversational topics. That day, Chance wore a short-sleeved button-up shirt, blue jeans, and a black and white baseball cap. But at some point, the golfing group moved on to talking about Chance's career and how he was going with that. And Chance explained that he had been laid off from his mining company, but he was soon to be starting at his new job instead. Though it is unclear what was said at the time, it is then known at this point a few distasteful comments were thrown around, mainly kind of poking fun and being critical of Chance's job. And considering Chance wasn't really an individual that would overreact to things or hold grudges, this was something that made him really angry, enraged in fact. I mean, he just couldn't bear to be with them any longer. Leaving the golf course, Chance resigned himself to kind of calling up Bailey and basically asking her if she could pick him up. He was absolutely adamant that he wanted to go back home to Wyoming. So Bailey picked him up, and as they were driving, Bailey basically suggested that perhaps they should go to her grandparents, because it would be a short drive, and it would give Chance an opportunity to cool off. But Chance did not want to do this. He didn't want to spend any more time with her family at all. He was adamantly sure that he just wanted to go home. And at some point, shortly after, whilst they were driving, an argument occurred. And this seemed to be the boiling point for Chance, because as soon as they pulled up at her grandparents' house, he just got out of the car and marched off. And he basically told Bailey that he was going on a walk to clear his head. Bailey didn't go after him at this point, because though she was angry too, She knew it wasn't uncharacteristic of him to go off for a walk when he just needed to let things lie and calm down. She just presumed he would come right back. Now, around 15 minutes into Chance's walk at about 7:45 p.m, he called up his best friend Matt Miller, and he basically told Matt about his argument with Bailey and how he just wanted to go home and he wanted someone to pick him up. And Chance basically said that if no one was willing to do that for him, then he was just going to walk himself to Torrington, Wyoming. And so unfortunately Matt couldn't pick him up because he was over 4 hours away. And then when Chance phoned other family members, they basically said the same thing. They were just too far away to come and help him out. During his conversation with Matt, Chance had stated quite clearly that he was walking along some place that he called the ditch. And this was basically referring to a long stretch of road he was walking up. For reference, for Chance to actually walk to Torrington, which was around 35 miles away, that would be estimated to take him about 12 hours. So this certainly wasn't a decision made with a clear mind. Meanwhile, just past 8 p.m, and Bailey was really starting to get worried by this point, because Chance hadn't come back, and realistically, how far could he have actually walked? So Bailey phoned up Chance's parents and basically made them aware of the situation. She said that they had got into kind of a small argument and that Chance had just got really angry and walked off. Chance's family wanted to drive up straight away and come help look for him, but Bailey persuaded them not to. She said it wasn't worth them driving up such a long way when her and her family had it under control. And also there was a thunderstorm scheduled to be rolling in that night, so she didn't really want them driving in such poor weather conditions. So as Bailey would tell it later on, she spent hours searching along the roads for Chance. And by around 9 p.m, her grandfather also got into his car and started doing the same thing. But 2 hours after this, at 11 p.m, Bailey phoned up Chance's family again, and this time she said that her and her family had to stop looking for Chance because the thunderstorm had officially rolled in. And at this point, Bailey's family could only presume that if Chance was stuck out in the thunderstorm, then he would have the good sense to seek shelter. But what was strange about this particular second phone call from Bailey was that when she was speaking, it's like all the intensity and the stress had just been dialed up. Because only a few hours ago, when Chance's parents had talked to Bailey for the first time, yes, she was worried about Chance, but she was reasonably confident that he was going to come back. But now she was absolutely frantic on the phone, saying that she didn't think they were going to find Chance, and that if they did find Chance, the next time they would find him would likely be in a body bag. And I can't imagine at this point how hard that would have been for Chance's parents to hear, especially Dawn, who was doing most of the talking on the phone. But Dawn stayed strong for both of them and basically told Bailey she had to stay positive and that Chance would come back. Because, you know, Chance was very outdoorsy, so a thunderstorm shouldn't be an extra problem for him. If he wanted to make his way back, he would be able to. The next day, on the Sunday, Bailey woke up from an awful sleep and had the horrible realisation that Chance hadn't woken up next to her. So at 11 a.m, Bailey reported him missing to the police, whilst her and her family got their own searches underway. Now initially the authorities didn't really take Chance's disappearance very seriously. They kind of focused on the fact that because he'd had drinks at the golf course that day, that he was probably somewhere in Gering drunk and would come back eventually when he recovered. But this didn't make sense to Bailey's family, because where would he actually go? He wasn't familiar with the area at all, so that was just not something that Chance would ever think about doing. Regardless, Chance's family came up, and this included his parents and his two brothers. And whilst they were there, Bailey's family actually paid for accommodations for them. Between the two families applying pressure on the police, the officers eventually decided to get involved. So the police worked on trying to track any of Chance's phone pings and also look at some local surveillance footage to see if he had been picked up on any of the cameras. because after talking to some people, the police did have a rough idea of where they thought he was heading. The police eventually did manage to piece together Chance's movements the night he had disappeared, and this was through phone pings, witness statements, and several videos of surveillance footage. And so the night Chance went missing went something like this. So as we know, around 7:30 PM, Chance had got into his argument with Bailey, he got out of the car and then he walked off. And then we know 15 minutes later at 7:45, this is when Chance had his conversation with Matt and told him that he was going to walk up to Torrington. 4 minutes later, at around 7:49 PM, Chance was spotted walking past the Domino's Pizza restaurant. This was on 10th Street in Gering and was in line with Chance heading north to get to Scottsbluff, Nebraska. Then 2 minutes later, at around 7:51 PM, Chance was caught on surveillance footage. In this, he was by himself and he was walking past some businesses still in the Gering area. Around 50 minutes later, at 8:46 PM, this was kind of the cut-off point in which no one could get in contact with Chance anymore, and it was undetermined at this point whether it was because the phone was running low on battery or he had just turned his phone off. Now the strangest thing happens at 9:08 PM, which suggests that at this time he must have had a little bit of charge in his phone still. So Chance's aunt gets a text from him, but when she reads it, she couldn't make head nor tail of it. There was just the use of one emoji and then a random sequence of letters. It was a message his mother Dawn believed was definitely not sent by Chance. With no further action from the phone, around 10 PM was the last time Chance was caught on surveillance footage. He was seen walking past two businesses and an apartment complex in Terrytown. This was on Terry Boulevard and Stable Club Road. And I think this part of the walk is particularly weird, because if you look on the map, if Chance was intending to go to Torrington, then he would just have to keep going straight up. But to cut in left like that seems really weird to me. Though the surveillance footage does show at that point, Chance looks down at his phone, then looks back up, then turns sharply left. So this definitely confirms that when he made that decision to cut in, he was definitely of sane mind and that was definitely something he was intending to do. Extensive searches by law enforcement took place on the 7th of July, under the charge of Chief George Holthus. But unfortunately, these were conducted without success. The search efforts included 17 different law enforcement agencies, divers, horses, cadaver dogs, ATVs, and hundreds of volunteers. So it was quite unbelievable that nothing was found at all, bearing in mind they'd searched over 2,400 acres of land at this point. Though the reason for such backup being brought during the search was the police were working on the main theory that Chance had fallen into the North Platte River, or he had gotten stranded somewhere remote during the storm and couldn't come back. You have to remember that the storm was one of the most credible and definite facts of what happened the night Chance disappeared, so it makes sense as to why the police would focus their main theories around the thunderstorm and act accordingly. I mean, that thunderstorm had been so bad that it had caused blackouts locally. On the 8th, the police fully focused their search on the North Platte River and some of the surrounding railroad properties. The police even drained out Central Gering Canal, but that didn't amount to anything either. And then a day after, on the 9th, officials resorted to asking the public and local businesses to share basically any surveillance footage they had during the time that Chance had gone missing. Also on the 9th, and just to remind everyone at this point it was only 3 days after Chance had gone missing, Bailey approached the police with a question that absolutely floored them. She was asking for Chance's death certificate. And of course the police found this odd because Chance had only been considered a missing person for a couple of days and they had no confirmation that he was dead in any capacity, so no, she couldn't have the death certificate. Sensing the police didn't think very highly of her question, Bailey did rush to defend herself, saying that it was a valid question because she needed to make sure she was going to be able to provide for her baby. And in fairness to Bailey, like I said, she was a young mother and she was going through nursing school at the time. Despite the horrible experience of Chance going missing, she still had bills to pay and they had just bought a new house together. She likely would have been worried about how she could survive on her own, especially if the worst case scenario came to life. A day after, on the 10th of July, Chance's family sat down with the police at a conference. And obviously Bailey was at this too, and together they just made a public plea for more information on Chance's whereabouts. But then afterwards, for the second time in 2 days, Bailey asks the police again for Chance's death certificate, and their answer is the same, that she can't have it because Chance isn't dead. But by Thursday, on the 11th, after only a few days of searching, most of the extensive big searches were called off. It was basically fruitless to continue because they just couldn't find anything that could help them. A day after, they did release an official image of Chance, and this time the police gave the public an image which basically showed what clothes Chance had been wearing the night he had gone missing. And this actually earned them a potential sighting from an individual in Casper, Wyoming. They claimed that they had seen Chance at a Walmart on the east side of Casper, though the time this was at wasn't confirmed. If this sighting was true, it would then suggest that Chance had indeed made it to Wyoming like he had intended to. But to get there in such a short space of time, then he would had to have at least had a lift from somebody. Gering police officer Sean West went to go check this out himself, but after trawling through about 6 hours of footage outside the Walmart and the surrounding area, he just could not confirm or deny that the sighting was valid. By this point, $10,000 was being offered if anyone could provide any information on Chance's whereabouts. The police had announced that his bank account had been untouched and that they were currently trying to get a warrant to search through all his phone records. Unbelievably, the police never got back to Dawn with the phone records, so she basically had to acquire them and sift through them herself. From her investigative work, she concluded that there was no odd numbers or calls that had been made during that time. On the phone, there had been some small activity at around 11 PM, but when she conferred with the phone companies, they basically said to her that with data that small, it was likely an app that was updating in the background. So 2 weeks have gone by and Chance is still missing. Dawn gets a call from the police, and when they phone her originally, she's kind of eager but kind of apprehensive because she thinks they may have more information on Chance. But they don't. They ask her if she has any lawyers yet. And this makes Dawn pause because did she really need lawyers? I mean, she said as much. And she was basically confused as to whether her and her family were being implicated in something. The police assured her that this was not the case and they just wanted to clarify that Chance's family were doing the same thing. Dawn asked the same thing as what? And that's when the police said that Bailey's family had already lawyered up. And Dawn was completely blindsided by this because Bailey hadn't mentioned anything about that and she just couldn't understand why they'd taken such extreme measures so quickly. The police did say that in Bailey's family's defence, they thought that getting a lawyer would speed things up, when in reality the police just said it would slow things down. Now even just talking and questioning Bailey's family was going to be significantly harder, because they had a lawyer who was being paid to make every single thing they tried as difficult as possible. Chance's family were cleared early on in the investigation. They even offered to pay for polygraph tests, but the authorities said that that wouldn't be necessary. Differently, Bailey's family could not be completely cleared, even though they were cooperative with the police in most aspects. This was because they had got lawyers so quickly, which basically just closed them off from any line of questioning, and basically meant that they didn't have to take any polygraph tests. On the 27th of November 2019, the authorities released some new information on Chance's case. They found out that sometime between 9 PM to 10 PM, probably before Chance's phone was just about to run out of battery, a final phone ping comes from a cell phone tower at the Riverview Golf Course, or more specifically 2 to 3 miles south of it. By this point, it would have meant that Chance had been walking for over 2 hours, even as the thunderstorm got underway. No official searches were done at the Riverview Golf Course, yet by the 6th of July 2020, a special walk and prayer vigil was set up in the name of Chance. The walk starts at the Dominoes and then continues to the last place Chance was seen. Chance's family and the public thought a breakthrough might have occurred on the 18th of October 2021. Human remains were found on the property in Scottsbluff County, near the North Platte River. A human arm bone and a piece of cloth, to be exact. So the Nebraska DNA lab basically set off to testing the bone marrow in the sample to see if they could get a match. Though it was already looking a lot clearer that these remains probably weren't going to belong to Chance, especially because the piece of cloth that had been taken from where the remains were didn't match up to the clothes that Chance was last seen wearing. Officially, on the 14th of September 2023, the DNA results confirmed that the bone marrow did not belong to Chance. So unfortunately, his case remains cold, even still with tips incoming. Considering the police's lack of progress on the case, volunteers like Matt Miller and others of Chance's friends have all gone out there to Scottsbluff to be searching all these routes, basically things they thought that the police might have missed. These efforts continued from 2020 all the way into 2024. So far, according to Matt, they've conducted 25 searches of the area, starting at the golf course and then kind of going past the North Platte River up to Torrington. As for alleged sightings, there was one said to be on Owl Road, which was still in daylight hours. If this was the case, then Chance's walk to the Riverview Golf Club would have been under 2 hours, because it kind of means he cuts in. And this new route would take him in much closer proximity to the North Platte River. As for new evidence and leads in 2024, Chance's family has hired a private investigator with RD Investigations. And the investigator eventually found that there was an additional sighting of Chance in Scottsbluff by a convenience store clerk. This places him around 2 miles away from where he was last seen on the surveillance footage at the Dominoes on Martha Road. The clerk recalled that between 8:30 PM and 9:30 PM, Chance had come into his shop, and he distinctively remembered Chance having a tense conversation in the back of the shop with another man. Chance then went up to the till to buy some tobacco and a Monster energy drink. The store clerk remembered this particular interaction because firstly, that day he thought it was quite notable that Chance wasn't wearing a raincoat, and because the storm had kind of started and it was raining lightly, the entirety top half of his t-shirt was soaked. And second, whilst the clerk was clearing Chance for his purchase of tobacco, Chance basically told the clerk that he had grown up in South Dakota on his family's farm, and basically that's why his driving licence hadn't been changed. The clerk then teased him about crazy people from South Dakota and that they could only be the ones that would decide to walk around in the Nebraskan storm. The clerk also did mention that at the time Chance had said that he did have an argument with his wife and that he had walked off to cool down, but now he was feeling a bit better and he was intending on going back. Which he likely could have done because at this point in Chance's journey it just would have been about 40 minutes back. The clerk praised Chance for his level-headedness, in the situation with his wife and consequently her whole family. Chance then left right after the man he'd been arguing with. Though the man got into an unidentified vehicle, the clerk couldn't really produce any more details, especially in regards to Chance. He didn't know whether Chance went out and got into the car with that individual, or they had further altercations, or Chance just went his separate ways. Regardless, at the time the clerk said he was kind of more worried about the incoming thunderstorm that was going to hit them quite hard. To accompany this lead was another bizarre one, perhaps the weirdest the lead could possibly get, but it happened within a mile vicinity of where Chance was at the store. Two women in their mid-20s were said to be running down the street frantically calling for assistance. They then got into a white two-door pickup truck, which was towing a small boat on a white trailer. The two women seemed to know the driver. But what was strange about this sighting was that at the time the witnesses said that the two women were very beautiful, like model beautiful. And that's just so random considering the location they were in. Brian Eads, the current lead investigator of the case, has admitted that he has got those tips too about that situation, but he's never been able to confirm whether those sightings were particularly credible or had any link to Chance's case. He was actually quite tight-lipped about it, which is much different as opposed to his 2022 interview he took, in which he basically spoke about how he thought Chance might have been the victim of a robbery gone wrong, and basically came out with his statements that said he had multiple witnesses that saw something like that taking place. As always, towards the end of my cold case videos, we go into theories, but I have to remind everyone that these theories are purely based on information I have found myself. They are 100% not definite. The first theory is that it was a potential robbery gone wrong, and as I said, the lead investigator apparently has witness statements to back this up. Not to mention, Chance was in a tense conflict with a stranger before he disappeared. And what of those two beautiful women? Were they running around calling for assistance because it was some type of scam? Perhaps they were trying to lower someone's defences? The second theory is accidental drowning. Potentially Chance fell into the North Platte River, because obviously in a thunderstorm rivers do surge, so it would definitely be a dangerous area to be in. And we have all Chance's locations to suggest that he was walking a long way. Could he have stopped for a breather or to go to the toilet and then he just fell in? Just because someone is outdoorsy doesn't mean they can never truly be prepared for something like that. And especially if we look back on what the shopkeeper said about the fact that Chance was planning to go back to Bailey after their argument, which suggested he was in no way equipped in any shape or form to be in a thunderstorm or walk for miles. He was just lightly dressed, the same way he'd been when he'd gone golfing. Not to mention there is poor visibility in thunderstorms. And the night that Chance was travelling north towards Torrington, there were many different routes he could have taken that would have led him to the Riverview golf course. One such way includes a dam, and if he went this way, this could be considered a hazard because of just how high the water levels were getting. Matt Miller and Chance's mother Dawn really refute this theory and basically stick to the fact that Chance was a very physical and outdoorsy man. He was a former college rodeo star and he had expansive experience in hunting. Plus, they said that if he had got within the vicinity of Riverview Golf Course, then he was past the river by that point. Some people suggest that Chance might have been drunk that night during the argument with Bailey, considering that he had some drinks at the golf course. But not only do I think this is a disservice to Chance's character, considering there is no proof to say he was drunk, the only way he possibly could have got close enough to the North Platte River or most other bodies of water was to climb over gates and fences? Why would he leave the actual road to get so close to the river in such a horrible storm? And to do all that navigating and climbing is a real big chore if you're intoxicated. The third theory is foul play. Web sleuths and individuals on social media have for a long time pointed the blame onto Bailey's family, considering Chance's disagreement with them was the reason he left on foot in the first place. Whatever happened in the argument Chance had with Bailey, and then beforehand when he'd got into an argument with her family, the shop clerk that Chance had spoken to clearly thought that Chance was being reasonable and actually quite forgiving to keep a level head in the situation. So they must have said something quite out of order. Plus, why was Bailey so sure that Chance was dead? That just doesn't seem like a reasonable response considering everything that's happened. I know she was under stress to pay the bills, but I'm having a hard time seeing that her family wouldn't have helped her out for as much as she needed in light of Chance being gone. So why would she need his death certificate to provide money for the baby? Rumours, and web sleuths in particular, even suggest that a few days after Chance had gone missing, Bailey's family had work done in their garden. More specifically, they were laying concrete down. Of course, the police never backed this up, and Brian Eads practically said that at the minute, the family have been fully cooperative with their efforts and have even let them search their property. Bailey herself doesn't take many interviews, but during the one she did in the past, she basically stated that she wasn't going to do any more in the future because she was sick of all the death threats she was getting. And I want to reinforce that because this is obviously an ongoing investigation, there's absolutely no reason for anyone to be being that awful to her. I mean, you have to remember she's going through an awful time too. Whatever people's opinions are on the case, she is a wife who has lost her husband, and she is a mother who has lost a father to a child. Then, some people have also brought up the fact that Bailey's brother was a trucker, and that he was driving around the night Chance had gone missing, and, he left town the next day. And we have to acknowledge the tragedy did tear the two families apart. The Engleberts haven't been able to see their grandson since Chance went missing. And for me personally, I think Bailey's family keeping the grandson from Chance's parents is really cold-hearted in light of what's happened, because they've already lost a son and now they're expecting them to lose a grandchild. I mean, Chance's family seemed convinced that it was some sort of homicide that was involved in Chance's disappearance, so that might have been something that led to the estrangement. At the start of the case, there were whisperings locally that Bailey's family had actually accused Chance's family of having driven up there themselves and killing Chance. Before we go into the final theory, it's also worth noting that a Reddit user, who was anonymous at the time and has now deleted their account, uploaded a certain statement. In it, they implicated two men, Jason Lealing and Adric Blanco. As of 2024, both individuals are already in prison with assault charges unrelated to Chance's case. This is the actual post. Paradise Haven just may be the final resting place for Chance Englebert, who was killed in May 2019 by Adric Blanco and Jason Lealing from Scottsbluff, Nebraska. Jim Lawson is running cover, preventing any search warrants. He was the sheriff. Adric Blanco told me he was only supposed to beat up Chance, good enough so Chance would stop laying hands on his girlfriend. Adric ended up beating Chance to death. He showed me his hands right after the incident, and I remember them being severely cut up. Adric has bragged to me about knowing where the body was at near the river. Chance is located in the manhole septic next to Kenny Kaufman's trailer, which is parked on Paradise Haven at the end of West Overland and Scottsbluff. It blows my mind we cannot get this looked at. The murderer literally confessed to me whilst he was intoxicated. I am with 100% certainty that his stories are accurate and true. Adric accidentally told me that the last time he was near that property, him and his cousin Omar moved a couple of bags onto it. There is no city sewer at Paradise Haven. There's no reason for Kenny to have a manhole next to his camper. Allegedly, Chance's mother has confirmed that these two have been suspects from the beginning of the investigation. Yet the statement says that Chance was killed in May, yet in reality he didn't go missing until July. So is the whole statement false, or were the dates just mixed up? The final theory is manslaughter. Could Chance have been hit by a car? His body might have been disposed of right after. Remember, he was walking down that long stretch of road. It was awfully windy and the roads were absolutely soaked from the rain. Was there a chance that one of the cars accidentally swerved? Regardless, Chance's family continued to seek support from the community, asking for the widespread sharing of missing persons flyers. Dawn expresses her ongoing grief and the need for support. She emphasises that she desperately wants answers, but also acknowledges that it's very likely she may never get any. She is touched by the amount of support and care they've received, and in her words, said that she just wants his name, his beautiful smile, and his story to be shared. In Chance's hometown, they have the Chance Leslie Englebert Memorial Demolition Derby. Everything earned from the derby is paid forward. The current reward for information on Chance is $17,500. The private investigator and the police are open to additional information from the public. Their numbers will be in a link in the description below. So will a link to a shop with products. Buying those products contributes money towards finding Chance. Comment down below what you think happened to Chance Englebert. Thank you for watching.